Okay, so now we're at the point of testing. I've gone through and detailed outlined I guess, some of the things that we're hoping to achieve here. But now the rubber meets the road. Now it's time to actually get down and assess the stiffness, the affixement of the various aluminum systems, and the fiberglass system that I've set up with the aluminum liner. But first I'm going to show you how, in the spirit of this video, my idea is to explore this kind of stuff in a rational, reasonable way, I guess. And the biggest thing is cheaply. If you were to just go out and get set up with a 50 BMG system, you're going to spend 10 grand. You're going to have a couple of presses. You're going to have a big expensive rifle. You're going to have a bunch of specialized equipment that you didn't have before from all your other reloading. And when you're all done, you're going to shoot maybe minute of angle. Well, that's not acceptable to me. So what I've done is, for less than that price, I've built 4 rifles. I'm using found equipment. As you can see in the background, I had to buy, you can't see this, but I bought 1 press, and I bought 1 set of, might as well bring them up here, I bought 1 Lee collet sizing die assembly, which I haven't used, and I probably won't use through this testing, but I didn't know. Like the rest of my dies, I turned a ring for it, so I'm using the locking ring only to lock the engagement ring or the swap out ring. Because when it comes to the testing, we have to be able to roll. So what I've done, I've just picked up, I've taken a box, I've got 4 of these boxes, and in each box, these are just, they're not for this. This stuff is just lodged in here. These are just, I don't know, brass boxes, bullet boxes, something. And so what I'm doing for my testing, I'm going to do 3 rounds of arbitrarily fired Lake City brass that I got from a guy. I bought, I don't know, 100 rounds or something. And these have been fired in all sorts of different guns. So these are, I've tried to find head stamps that match. This is Lake City 06, Lake City 08, Lake City 08. So I'm close here with these 3. And then I took some brand new Hornady cases. And I'm going to go through and show you what I've done. The only thing I'm missing in my reloading setup is an adjustable neck. I may take one of my dies, because I've got a couple of them. Turn that off. I better get it closer here in case that happens again. I'm working, so between jobs, got a minute. So I'm just going to detail how I'm going to test this, how I'm going to reload in a cost-effective and simple manner, and the modifications that I've made to be able to do that. As I said, I'd like an adjustable neck, but that brings us into a whole nother realm of dies. So if I do that, I'm going to make that. I'm going to take one of these dies and burn it out at the top and make adjustable neck bushings for it. But I can work around that. Adjustable neck bushings are not that big a deal. What I absolutely need is consistency. Reloading using BR. One of the reasons that the BR cartridges, and when I say BR I mean bench rest, I don't mean as in 6BR, I mean the PPC and the BR line, and more the 47 line. The 6.5x47 Lapua case is getting wildcatted into a host of different things. Another one is the Palma. But the rules with those are, you must form good brass. With the PPC, that's almost automatic because they made it. In fact, handmade PPC blown out from 220 Russian will normally shoot better than any of the common I say common. There's Sacco and there's Norma. And there's a couple of their boutique companies possibly making cases. The smart way to run a PPC is to buy a PPC, probably a known quantity like a 262 neck, and then call somebody. Like, I'll just throw Ron Haynes' name out there because he did at one time at least make good cases. But I'm using him only as an example of somebody. The best way you can do this if you're a newbie or a beginner or just learning the ropes, buy a good gun and buy your cases built by somebody and made from 220 Russian cases. Because the process by which those cases are made results in a nice, straight, consistent, easily maintained case. A lot of people make the mistake of buying a PPC and then going out and buying into the Norma thing where you buy cases that are ready to go from Norma. The problem is that unless you know what you're doing or your gunsmith sets up for those Norma cases, you will get improper fitments upon the first firing. So, the 4 guns that I put together here, I'm using things I've learned in the PPC paradigm. One of them is forcing initial fire forming. In other words, forcing the cases in. I've got an episode that talks about that. They go in and they seat solidly. So, in terms of consistency, number 1, you must make good cases. Then you must maintain good cases. Now understand that I'm not modifying this case in any way. It may well be that as I move forward, I'm going to go ahead and blow this thing out and bring it in and shape it in such, maybe shorten it, make it into something that's more amenable. But at this point, I'm going to work with what we have. So I bought a match grade reamer with the appropriate size neck that I can work with. The rest of the reamer behind that is junk. But I'm turning my dies out, opening them up. I've got 2 of these dies just because one of them came with the Lee collet assembly and the other one came with the press when I bought it. So I ended up with 2 sizing dies. And I've got one of them turned out to a size that I'm going to play with for a while. And to turn it out, I put it in a lathe and I ran a super hard tool inside and I actually reset the angles. So, consistent resizing, big deal. Now we need consistent lock. For my consistent lock, I've taken one of my locking rings and I've slotted it. I've actually slotted it all the way through this side and a little bit into this side so that now when I tighten this set screw down, it locks on there. Now, does it lock on perfectly square? No, of course not. At some point, some hosebag's going to jump in here and start talking about, oh yeah, you're piecing all these parts together, there's no way to get alignment. Well, let me tell you a dirty little secret. Alignment is highly overplayed. You can go out and spend $1,500 on a 1972 vintage Hollywood press with a ram that big around and scrupulous alignment and no flex. You can go buy old school O-frame presses. You can do whatever you want for alignment. But when it's all said and done and everything is screwed together and now you take a case and you slip it into a shell holder so you have a little... The interface is stupid and it's designed in terms of so-called alignment. When I say alignment is overplayed, I'm going to tell you that alignment of the press is not a factor in making straight ammo. It's simply not a factor. Consistent sizing is important. So you need a stiff press and you need a consistent lock. And what I have here is something that I can lock down consistently. Now the next problem is, and this again is something that works for me and doesn't work for everybody because I have lathes and mills and time to mess with this. The problem is that there's 3 different thread sizes, 4, but 3 in the presses. And I had to build this little collar to thread onto my Lee dies so that I can thread this into this particular press. Because in the interest of consistency, the other part of that is it must be fairly quick and easy. Recently, I think it's Lee again, came out with their quick change system where you've got split threads and you put a little collar in and you can have many sets of dies and they click back in and they repeat to within a half a thou. I've decided to go with 2 presses, and with them I've come up with a nice, consistent, easy way to swap and move and go so that I can get consistent sizing. So it has to be quick, easy, repeatable, and most of all consistent. It has to be consistent on this plane. Forget about all of this kind of stuff. That's just crap. Bottom line is, you take a nice straight wire and you bend it, you can't straighten that wire. By the same case, if you fire your gun and you get a crooked case, you cannot straighten it. And if you do, you've accomplished nothing. I should do some episodes. The problem is that normal people don't learn from listening, they learn from seeing. So to make this work, I'd have to do this huge exhaustive test where I'd put in crooked ammo and straight ammo and off-center ammo and eccentric ammo and shoot it on a target, because most people want only empirical evidence. Well, I don't deal with that. Tens of thousands of rounds of empirical evidence give me some ideas, but methodology is what matters to me. If there's no mechanism, there's no argument. And there's no mechanism to promote the fact that, well, let's not get into the whole brass thing. I've done that before. Let's just say that I'm turning out super consistent, super easy through 4 different guns. They're not technically interchanging without a little bit of work because I hand cut all 4 chambers. Literally hand cut them on the lathe. So they're not identical. I'll have to have a reamer built before I can do that. But I have completely repeatable resizing. Now, once we've got the alignment paradigm and the squish paradigm and the consistency paradigm and the swapping out the dies quickly paradigm figured out, the single most important thing in the actual reloading process, and this is especially true when we don't have neck bushing, so I can't soft seat, is that we not deform the tip of the bullet. Now, because I have 2 sizing dies, I have 2 of these. These are actually bullet cedar stems. It's hard for you to see, but one of them sits a little taller than the other one. The one that sits taller is the factory one. And the factory one doesn't fit the way I would like it to. It teeters in there a little bit. Okay, nor does it come up near to the ogive. So that's what's going to happen to this one down the road. I'm going to put it back in the lathe and I'm going to burn inside there and I'm going to bring it down, clear down to where the ogive is hitting. But that's a future project. For right now, I took this one and I ran a carbide cutter into it and I closely approximated. I wanted to get this touching on 2 points. I knew I couldn't do any better than that because it's a compound ogive. It's not parallel sides. In the sense of parallel, what I mean is they're not even, they're bulged slightly. There's an ogive assembly going on. So I had to go in and fit this thing, and here's how if I take a bullet now and I colored it with a dark Sharpie and I stick it in there and I spin it, let's see what we get. See what I've got? I've got 2 spots. Now, these are shiny because this is very thin. It's not that I got 2, those are the 2 spots are on the bullet. This was actually run in with a cutting bit. And yet, see if this one shows the same rings. It does. See, we're showing 2 rings. Now in between those, I can see brush marks. What I've done is I've matched a section of this ogive, and yes, it's touching front and rear and it's brushing in between. It's way down here. May or may not be super consistent, but I feel it's going to be more consistent than the factory thing. So, I've turned and fitted. I should sacrifice some of these $5 bullets with some lapping compound and run them in there and actually burn, but I'm not going to go there yet. There's a couple of things in this test that I'm going to start with. First thing is, I'm doing my initial shooting, which is going to be starting here shortly, without truly glass bedding the systems. I've got 3 aluminum stocks that are just bolted together, aluminum to aluminum, and 1 Beast 2 stock, which is fiberglass based, and it's got an aluminum bedding block. And again, I didn't fully bed that. I'm just running it on the aluminum. So I'm going to do my initial tests and make my brass, make my cases, get everything up and running. Because I've only fired 1 gun. So far, I just have the old screen door that I went out and I ran it through the paces on the sled up to epic velocities to proof test the barrel to see if it was going to blow up. It's got 7 or 8 or 10 rounds through it. So I've been shooting, but I haven't been shooting for effect. Now I'm going to start shooting for effect, and I'm going to start by shooting aluminum to aluminum on all 4 setups. And then move forward and find out what I'm going to need. I expect to hit somewhere around 3/4 minutes of angle right off the bat. Hopefully consistently through all 3 of these. 4 of these. I keep saying 3 because there's 3 aluminum and 1 fiberglass. The fiberglass one, I don't know. I test fired it twice and it shakes around like, wow, it doesn't feel as stable. Because I've had to go put a couple of rounds through all of these just to make sure the muzzle brake clearances are right, make sure it didn't blow up, make sure it didn't do anything before I go on and start shooting for effect. I test fire. That's all I've done so far is test fired these rifles. Now I'm going to start making brass, firing them for effect, and then I'm going to end up bedding them completely. But I wanted to show you a few of the things that I'm doing. Also early on, I mentioned as how I've been knocking the primers out with a hand tool. And that's because I had to take the primer assembly out of one of these dies so that I could turn it. This particular one, I can see the turning marks. This one here is untouched. This has got a factory finish inside. This one's got a hand-turned custom finish inside. And to get to it, I have this non-removable. So I took a 3/8. Yeah. That's a cedar. I'm missing a die here. Ah! Told you I had a turned out one. I did not even have a turned out one here. The one that I had was polished inside but not turned out. So, I'm going to have to show you how my seating die, oh, I screwed it in over here, that's what happened. I knew that I had it with me. I'm so sorry for wasting this time. This is the turned out resizing die with a collar on it to fit. And to turn it out, I had to take this decapping and neck sizing assembly out. Now I'm going to turn this neck sizing assembly down and out of the way. But what I had to do to modify it, now that I ran a 3/8 bit in the back, I cut it off, I ran a 3/8 bit into it, burned it out, didn't even touch the sides. The whole thing came apart, I bored down into here, and now I've taken a piece of all thread and epoxied it back in, and the die goes back together. And it seats scrupulously fine because of the tapered surfaces in there. And now the die is back to original configuration. It will decap, resize, and it's got a collar on it. So, these are the things that I've done to promote the alignments that are necessary. Locking ring so that I can screw this in and out. Sizing collar. Which, this sizing collar is so you can't buy this because these threads go up into these threads. I had to align it in such a way. This actually was a piece about this. It was an adapter collar that I bought. It looked like this, but when I turned it, I ran the threads up inside the threads, and when it hit here, this piece actually just fell off. The threads actually intruded. So it's essentially one of these. It's not, but it looks like this. This is actually the wrong size. This doesn't fit. This is 3 different sizes, which you can see here. Here, here, and all the way up to the 1 3/8, which is the big one here. I think it's an 1 3/8. Anyway, that's just to show you the steps that I've gone through to promote a consistent resizing regimen. I can make good cases. I'm going to make 3 of each, Lake City and Hornady. And then I'm going to use a good stout sizing regimen to just bump them so they go back in the chamber. And then I'm going to reload them using a fitted ogive, as fitted as I can do right now, seating tool. And I should be able to come up with very consistent, very solid. There's other tricks and things that I can do down the road, but this is where I'm starting to shoot for effect. This is where you're going to start seeing some groups and say, hey, does this work or does this not? In a sense, we are covering ground that's already been covered in all the other cartridges. We're taking the things we've learned from PPCs and 243s and 30-06s and 338 Lapuas and all the things through the years. We're going to apply them now to this big 50 BMG. The first thing I'm finding out is that it's extremely violent in these light guns. None of these guns are over 20 pounds. These are all light setups. Well, I shouldn't say that. No, my big Noreen gun in the fiberglass is coming in at 26 or something. But they're all lighter than most of the things that are out there. And so I had to go out before and I did videotape my testing, but it's very boring because it's just bang, 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 bang out the window. I put up some plywood on my window, so I'm going to be able to shoot out the window. I may well put out my live cameras so that you can watch the groups form, but it's kind of boring to watch somebody shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. So I'll probably just turn out about 20 groups on each of the 4 guns and then do an expose, bring them up and show what they've done. And then we can incrementally go ahead and start improving them the same way we've done. If you remember on my PPC episodes, I started with something and it didn't shoot very good, and then I improved and brought it up to the standards of the industry until they're shooting bug holes. And I've done this on many different guns. I had to go through this with the 300 WSM series, the 338, the 338 Hellbringer, the 338 McCallums on the Lapua case. We've been, and on all of these, we start out getting down around a half minute, and then we hone them down and get them under a quarter minute. I can see already that this is going to be a challenge, getting these light guns. I think I can get a 20-pounder down to quarter minute pretty easy, but judging by the violence, I don't know if I can ride them down smoothly enough between the time that that trigger trips and the muzzle brake takes over. Just test firing these to check for muzzle brake clearances with 2 different bullets and check velocities, initial starting velocities. I'm already finding these to be extremely violent setups. So, hey, we'll see where it goes. We're getting a good solid start on her anyway.